Accessible Media Specialist here at the Iowa Library for the Blind. So the game plan for today is to go over ePub. And this is kind of a crash course on what ePub is, what it isn't, sort of where to start on understanding sort of the differences from PDFs. That's the biggest one I'm going to be comparing it to just some accessibility points and other things. Throughout the webinar today, if you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat. I also am going to leave some time towards the end just to answer any questions that you guys may have. I'm going to start with the PowerPoint, just going to kind of really talk about an overall basic things with ePub. And then from there, I'm going to go online and I'll show you guys some of the websites that I use for converting things into ePub, as well as where to get extensions for your computer, or just kind of where to get some other resources for that. And then we'll open it up to questions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so this is my ePub crash course as I'm referring to it today. So as we go through what it is, benefits of ePub, accessibility with PDFs versus ePub, converting documents into ePub, and then Q&A. So when we look at what it is, it stands for electronic publication, and they just shortened it to ePub. It was first created in 2007. There have been a few different changes to the overall format over the last decade or so. It's becoming a much more of a standard format for any ebook that you find. And there's pros and cons to that, but it's becoming much more user-friendly and so much more usable with a lot of different documents. So there's a lot of e-reading software, there's a lot of devices, a lot of applications that can now use it that couldn't use it 5 years ago. So I think that's why you're seeing it become more of a standard format for a lot of productions to be using ePub as their book format. When we look at it, the nice things about it, like what it really does really well, is that it's really easy to turn things into ePub. There's no special tricks really. There's just a few different programs that you can use. The biggest one I think is reflow. So if you don't understand what reflow is, so reflow is where as you change the size of your display screen, the text will move to fit inside of that screen. So versus it being an iPad or an iPhone or even a desktop where you're taking the Chrome window and smashing it together, it'll move the text to fit inside that window, which is massive. Because think of a PDF, which I'll go into in a little bit, where you're focused on one part of the screen. You can zoom in and out, but when you zoom in, it just zooms in on that specific area. And there's so much more around it that you're missing, that you have to pan around or move around to get access to that information, versus getting all the information in a succinct line by reflowing to the device. And so when you look at kids in school going from an iPad to a computer, especially if they're using screen readers on top of that, I think that it makes a huge difference, because it allows the student to have all the information without having to scan to the left and right to read a complete sentence. It's already on whatever display that they're using. It can contain audio, video, and rich images, which is another nice thing. So for embedding audio clips, embedding video clips within the text itself, it'll fit in there and they can play it. So you can actively play it in the e-reading software itself without having to click a link to go to a YouTube page. You can embed it in there, which is just a really nice format and a way to kind of manage adding things into those documents. It is supported on multiple platforms, things like iBook. You literally could take a Word document of a lesson or something for your student, turn it into ePub, and put it into iBook on their iPad. So you could even, if you have any sort of document, you could put that in there and then they could read it in that format. The one weird thing that you can't read ebooks on is Kindles right now. So Kindle is one program that hasn't, they have their own format, which is kind of why that they don't allow ePub to work on this, because they obviously want you to use their format. There is some conversion that you can take Kindles and turn them into ePub and vice versa. So there is a workaround, but it is just kind of an annoyance that is a big one that doesn't use ePub at this time. And there are some nice security features within ePub, you know, the way that the document is locked. You know, with other PDFs and other Word documents and things, it's sometimes easy to gain access to it, to change it, save it as your own, those types of things. But in ePub, a lot of the times you're just viewing the file and the file's adjusting to what you're doing to it, but it's not changing what it is. It's also a lot easier to put things like password protections and other sort of security features throughout the documents, which is just a different way to handle some of those issues, especially if you're giving them out to a larger audience. And you just want to make sure that it doesn't get changed or get altered in any way, because you just want to make sure that it's the way you wanted it to be when you send it out. So that's the other nice thing about ePub, is it does have some pretty solid security features within there. Now I've talked a little bit about this when we look at the PDF versus ePub. So this is sort of the big point. All best practices for universal design for learning and document accessibility apply to ePub. So this is what I'm going to get on my accessibility soapbox here for a minute. So when you build a document in Word or wherever you build it, understanding the basics of accessibility, and I'm talking pretty basic stuff, things like just basic navigation with headers, alt text, and just sort of those basic understandings that exist. You have to have those in the document, because it doesn't matter if I turn it into a PDF or I turn it into an ePub. If the document wasn't built with an accessible mindset or using those universal design for learning techniques, it's not going to be accessible when it becomes an ePub. Just because you put it in ePub doesn't mean it magically becomes accessible. Same with the PDF. So that's why I think it's really important that you understand what those basics are, so you can build the correct document to then transition it into whatever you want it to be. And so that is, you know, one thing. A lot of times I think accessibility issues get blamed on whatever format it's in or the program it's in, when 99% of the time it's how it was built. And the things that you use to build it, and sort of the steps that you walked through to make sure that it was accessible and that all the boxes were checked to make sure that it was done correctly. And kind of like I talked about, the ePub does do that reflow, that's automatically in there. PDF doesn't. It wasn't built for that. PDF is a universal format. So what that means is that it's used around the world by everything that you could ever dream of, because I think it's such a basic format for what it is. And so that's why it's considered a universal format. But ePub is much more adaptable. So I'll show you guys an example in a little bit as far as making text bigger and smaller and kind of moving around. It makes a lot more sense from an adaptability standpoint with ePub. But going back to that first point, we got to make sure that the document is accessible, or else we're not going anywhere. And so that's the biggest thing to really identify and to look at, that it is accessible. That's a big one right there. So I'm going to kind of jump into some documents now and just give you guys some examples. So I'm going to stop and then reshare my screen. Let's check. I don't see any questions. If you guys have any right now, that was kind of my brief, kind of like going over stuff before we really dive in. So I'm going to go ahead and share now, and we're going to kind of go over a bunch of examples and other things that we can check out. Okay, so the first one I'm going to talk about is Convertio. And so this is a great one. I've used this for other things besides ePub. This one's really great just for, I mean, if you can make pictures into different formats, but it's really good at just turning things into something else. So it is really nice. Now the way it's the default setup, it's ePub to doc. Obviously I'd want it most of the time. I'm going to have that the other way. But this does have a Chrome extension. It works pretty slick. You just drop it in there and it turns it in there, and then you download the ePub file. And so that's a big one. And then the one that I use more, probably a little bit more, because this one has, I think, a better Chrome extension. This is the ePub reader. And so this is going to allow you to take this file here that you converted from a doc into an ePub, and it's going to allow you to read it. It's built into Chrome, so it doesn't take up any room on the computer. So if you're using a Chromebook, you could put it on there. It's not going to take up space on the computer or anything like that. There is a separate extension that you could have a read out loud, where it'll read the ePub document to you, which I think is really slick. And it is available in 24 different languages, which talk about UDL and accessibility. That's a big one right there. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys an example of what it looks like here. Let me check the chat quick. It looks like we have something in the chat. I can't find it now. All right. Can teachers order textbooks to our students in the ePub format? So right now, I'd have to check with Karen Cunningham. I know that's something that we're looking towards. I think the biggest benefit that we see is that we can get textbooks in the ePub format. So that's one thing where we could find a producer to get it in the ePub format for you. So I think it's something we're working towards. And I think that Karen Cunningham would know the answer to that more than I would, but I'm pretty sure that we could get a vendor that would give us like a textbook or something in that format. Good question. All right, so we're going to go here. And so I already have this built in here. So this would be like if you have the file. So I just took a blog post that I did for a old webinar and just turned it into an ePub. So it's getting your students started with a screen reader. So this is a really small one, and I'll go into a book in a little bit. I just kind of want to show this off. So yeah, this is the file. So it looks just like a basic Word document. But when you add in that read it to me, that's huge. When you add in that there could be videos integrated in here, that's huge. But also things just like plus and minus will change the size of the text. And if you notice, it's reflowing within the page. So granted, now that it's 2 pages, but if I go back out here, I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to take my window here, and you see that, how it reflows where it needs to be. So nothing is outside of the screen, which is just really slick from going from device to device. And even here, I can still plus and minus it to get it to the size that I need, and it goes way bigger than you would think too. And so even when I stretch it back out, it's going to add that second column in there for that other page, and it's going to just read right through. And then left and right are going to take you from page to page if there's multiple pages. So here it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 and 4. So then it drops you over there, giving you just that reflow that we talked about, and just allowing so much smoother of use for the student, which I really like this one. I think it's as a basic one, it works really well. As far as another one, this is epubbookscom. This one has a lot of free books that it kind of exist, and it's just a lot of. And so this one just has a lot of different things that you can check out, especially if you just want to kind of look and play around with it. So this is using the same reading program, that one that's built into it. So if you look here, you can still do the same thing within that. So that's really nice about it, that you can go for there, and you can always go back to their website and change and and it has a lot of other things here. And I will make sure that I link all the stuff that I talked about as far as links. I'll put that in the description when I post this on YouTube, so you guys can have access to these extensions. Okay, so another question from Beth was, so would that come from the publisher instead of going to the NIMAC? So some of the publishers are making it an EPUB. I think it's really going to be dependent on the book itself. So that's just going to be, I think, more of a publisher by publisher instance, and because it could go where we would go through the NIMAC to get that in that format, but I really think it's going to depend on the textbook. So for Android, so since Kindle doesn't read them, this is one that works really well for Android devices. And you can get files that you can put it on there. And this isn't an Android computer, so I don't have that access to kind of show you what it looks like. But it is a slick one that I've used on a Kindle Fire. You can have the same, larger text, smaller text, and some other things, and it will read to you. Just some other features that work really well with it. So I think that's a pretty solid one. I think we'll get rid of that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back here. So I think that the nice thing about it is that I think that turning a Word document into it is what I see as a big benefit for like short-term stuff where PDF, if a student's using a tablet, a student might be at home on an iPad or on their iPhone. I think it's a quick way to kind of get a document that's a little more accessible. And then when you look long-term, if you have a publisher that you can get the textbook into that format, then you're going to have those things like integrated audio, integrated videos into the text itself. And so that gives you just that whole benefit of not having to leave the document to go watch a video or leave the document to go listen to something, is that it's all built in, and that if they're built correctly, they should work with a screen reader. And so that's, a big thing. So I think when we talk about the publishers making them, going to the NIMAC, I think that, one of the things you really got to look at is making sure that they are accessible ePubs, which, if they're built correctly, they definitely should be. Or if it's something that we're getting, we're definitely going to make sure that it is accessible before giving it to who it needs to go to. Is there any questions? I know we've been asking a few good questions. I didn't know if we had any others right now. I'll give you guys a minute here. Trying to make sure I got. Go back over here. I mean, I really think that it's going to become a more versatile format the further on we go. I just think that because I think a lot of with PDFs is that you're seeing is that they're just becoming, I want to say like clunkier from time to time, where it seems like that either someone doesn't know how to build an accessible version, but when they turn it into a PDF, it just doesn't work as well. Or I think that it's because I think PDFs are great for certain things when you think of like documents. So like if it's like an official document and it's a click and sign kind of thing and you have to work your way through it and sign, I think that's where it fits well, is taking something that's already on paper or that needs to stay the same and turning it into something. I think that's where a PDF is going to be a big benefit. But when you really look at ePub, that's where I think that in the future of those sort of different adaptable features, because on some ePub readers, you can change things like even the font. You can change things, the color contrast, and like we said, font size, to really adapt it to the needs of that student, which I think are the biggest part about it. That make it so versatile is that you can adjust it to the needs of the student. Especially in like iBook. iBook would be a great one where you can change the font size. You can make the background black and the text white, for example, to really help with color contrast. And VoiceOver works with iBook. And so that's, once you get it into that format and you get it into iBook, I think that's where you're going to see those big differences of the student having access to the document and just being able to use it. So yeah. Last chance for questions here. Because then I'm going to kind of just show off one more thing before we go here. Go here. So one more thing I wanted to show off is if you guys, I know a few of you signed up for the other IMC webinars that we have done. So if you haven't got a chance to check them, if you didn't come to the webinar and you want to kind of check it out, we have posted them all on our YouTube channel. That is not where I wanted to go. So we do post them all, and there's also a lot of other good resources that we've been kind of trying to put together. With like BARD, we did one about NIMUS. That was 2 months ago. And we also have been doing like our youth stuff on here. But the other ones we're even kind of starting to do are some more like just basic uses. So like this one's about Braille screen input on an iPhone. Cane Tips is some short little videos on just cane usage and other things. So I think that, we're starting to really get our YouTube page up to a really usable point where now it's becoming a really good resource for a lot of the things that we've been working on. So just something to kind of check out if you're interested. I'm just been trying to promote it as best I can. We're up to a whopping 214 subscribers, so we're getting there. So yeah, well, that's all I got. So if you guys don't have any more questions, or if you want to, always feel free to email me or ask me questions if you have about anything in particular. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat there. And so if you ever want to reach out and ask, feel free, because I'm more than willing to dive deeper into some of this stuff and kind of break down any of the questions you have about it, or just kind of that even basic stuff that you just want to know more about when it comes to accessibility. So yeah. All right. Well, thanks for coming, guys. And I'll hang out for a minute if you want to ask anything else. But other than that, I'm good. So yeah, if you guys have any more questions, thanks for coming.